thought about this for a few months now, and I have decided to go on a low buy, but more of a permanent low buy rather than one that lasts for a month or so at a time. If you don't know what a low buy is, it's pretty much where you go a period of time, determined by you, where you limit your purchasing. I have quite a few reasons for wanting to go on a low buy. I think my first one that took me the longest to realize was my unhealthy relationship with objects, specifically clothing. And I think this relationship with clothing has been pretty unhealthy for a few years now, but it got especially bad this year. I've had low self-esteem, low self-confidence for a long time, and I ended up channeling all of my self-confidence into clothing, and I would rely on clothing and the way that it made me appear externally for confidence in myself. And even though I should have been a lot more responsible with my finances, I often chose to spend my money on clothing, even though I have bills to pay. I would buy secondhand clothing usually once a week or once every other week on Depop. I would get this high, this euphoria, I guess, whenever I would buy something and whenever it would get here and I would get to put it on. But that wouldn't last. That would, last a week or so, and then I would look for something else to buy because it was just an ongoing problem, and buying stuff was not helping me. It was a confidence issue, not an issue with my clothing. I would pretty quickly change my mind about whether I liked a piece or not, even if I had just bought it, because I would slowly lose the confidence that that piece of clothing made me feel about myself, and so I would just seek out something else to buy. And it got to a point where if I had to go somewhere or something and I, wasn't happy with the outfit that I had on, it ruined my day. It really did. It affected me way too much because I put so much of my self-value into my outfits, into my external appearance. And if my external appearance was not good enough, then I wasn't good enough. And I thought that, people were going to like me less if my outfit looked a certain way, when that's not the case. People don't care what you're wearing, and I should have realized that earlier. It's taken me months to realize that. Only this year did I start realizing why my relationship with clothing was so unhealthy, and I'm only just now actually tackling the problem. That's part of the reason why I am doing this permanent low buy, so I can work on my relationship with clothing and my relationship with myself. And my unhealthy obsession with buying clothing so I would have a little bit of self-confidence for a while led me to really place a lot of my financial priorities into clothing. Not all of them. I still paid my bills, but I put a lot of money that I could have saved into clothing. Clothing that honestly, most of it, I don't even own anymore. I got rid of it. I sold it, most of it, but I don't have it anymore. I had my priorities so out of whack. I often forgot about, or just flat out ignored, my other hobbies. This year I really got into sewing, and I wouldn't dare invest nearly, as much money as I did in sewing, or I wouldn't nearly invest as much money in clothing as, oh my god, hold on. I would not nearly have I didn't invest any money in sewing, okay? I just put it all with clothing. And I love art, I love painting, I love drawing. I went to college for video production, and I wish that I would have invested more money in my equipment, but I didn't because I just bought clothing because it made me feel better for a little bit. So that's another thing that I'm hoping this low buy will allow me to reset my priorities with all my hobbies and interests and allow me to spend more time doing other things, rather than worrying so much about what I'm wearing. And it's not a bad thing to worry about what you wear. It's not a bad thing to have confidence in what you wear at all. I think that I personally reached a really unhealthy point with my clothing purchases. And the last thing that has really pushed me to take this low buy thing seriously is my pursuit of minimalism. I've known about minimalism for years, and my interest has really peaked this year, the last couple of months especially. Yeah, I want to go on a permanent low buy, but I think pursuing a minimalist lifestyle will, also help me address my problems in other areas, because this low buy, I think it's mostly focused on my issues with clothing. I think minimalism will help me address all areas of my life and my general way of thinking when it comes to consuming things and investing my time in, the right places, the places that matter to me, investing my time in my relationships with the people that I care about, and, not worrying so much about the things that ultimately don't matter that much. I mean, I eventually want to get to a place in my life where I don't own as much as I do, and I want to only have things that add some kind of value to my life, whether that's being, useful or bringing me some kind of enjoyment. Alright, now that we've gotten my reasons out of the way, I'm gonna go over my rules. A lot of my rules were inspired by Andrea Jensen, who inspired me to do this permanent low buy. So my first rule is to only purchase 2 items per week. These 2 items are mostly going to be, like non-necessities. These 2 items will not include gifts that I receive or gifts that I buy for other people. Alright. Number two, I will only be purchasing 2 pieces of clothing per month. I don't think that'll be too hard. I think that I have been doing a lot better than I used to. I take a while to think about a piece of clothing before I buy it and make sure that it will actually be useful in my life and will fit well into my life before, I just impulsively buy it. I have a bit of a bad habit of romanticizing my life with said clothing item, imagining all the adventures that I would go on with that piece of clothing, but I just need to see it as a piece of clothing, not a piece of clothing that will bring me all these amazing adventures somehow. My third rule is to think about whether I do need to buy that piece of clothing or, whatever it is I'm thinking about buying, at least 1 week before I buy it. I usually give myself a couple of weeks to think about something before I buy it, sometimes longer depending on how much it costs. My fourth rule is that if I am buying a piece of clothing, that I can only purchase it with money that I earn on Depop. I've been selling clothing for a while on there. I've managed to save up some of the money that I've earned there, and so I have only been using that to purchase clothing for the last couple of months or so. I think that was a good idea because I'm not dipping into the money from my actual job. My fifth rule is to try to keep a wish list of the things that I want so that I don't end up browsing and looking for things to want. I have a really bad habit of that. Whenever I get bored, I go on Depop and I look for clothing to want whenever I already know that I have a very specific item in mind that I'm looking for, but instead I go look for something that I don't need. One thing that I also want to throw in here, I don't know if it fits as well, but I want to get to a point where clothing does not matter so much to me. I mean, yeah, I enjoy it and that's not a bad thing at all, but I spend way too much time thinking about clothing, worrying about, if I should spend my money on it, and worrying about, like, will I regret it whenever it gets here? I mean, sometimes I end up feeling guilty if I do buy it, even if I have thought about it for a really long time. And I think that routine, that way of thinking, is also unhealthy. I mean, it's good that I'm being more aware of my finances and trying to be more careful. I'm still almost at an obsessive point, just like I was earlier this year when, it's almost as if I didn't care how much money I spent. So I just want to get to a point where I am neutral about clothing and it doesn't, cause me to think about it, and that I don't think about it nearly as much as I do. I just want it to be another thing to me, don't care if I have it or not. Don't want to worry so much about the clothing that I have and worry about it not being good enough. I just want to be satisfied with what I have. I think that this permanent low buy that I'm trying to do will really help me with that, or at least I hope. And I hope that minimalism will also help me with that. I gotta really work on the whole minimalism thing. I really look forward to this permanent low buy, and I'll probably be posting monthly updates about what I decided to purchase that month and, how I'm feeling about the low buy still. So yeah, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed. See you in the next one.